In my country, the US, in the 1950s, there was a big Red Scare going on. People were afraid of communists, and there might be communists hiding among us. Now, an extreme manifestation of that belief was people who wore tinfoil hats. That is, aluminum foil in the form of a hat. Why? Well, they were paranoid. So these were people who were not only afraid of communism, they thought that maybe communists were sending out mind control waves to control people's minds, their thinking, their thoughts, or at least read their minds. Or maybe it was the CIA doing this, or the US government, or the Illuminati, or aliens. And so they wore tinfoil hats, particularly at home, and especially when they were watching TV, because they thought especially mind control waves are maybe coming through TVs. And this is crazy. It's very paranoid. These were individuals who are probably not mentally well. But this is an extreme example of the problems of believing in conspiracy theories. Ideas that had absolutely no evidence or basis in reality. And these are sort of like the sort of global conspiracy theories, because often these involved thinking that there was a global conspiracy to control people's minds, again, by some kind of foreign government, the CIA or foreign governments. And this would explain why, for example, why are people voting for liberals, leftists? How can they be succeeding? It must be mind control. Voters must be vulnerable to mind control. I'm going to protect myself with this tinfoil hat. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about global conspiracy theories, or world domination conspiracy theories, or New World Order conspiracy theories. And I'll talk about some of the types, some of the origins of these theories, or the influences behind them, and reasons for popular appeal. So first, we need to define some terms. So we'll talk about authoritarianism sometimes. So that refers to governments that reject political plurality, that is, differing viewpoints and opinions. Governments with strong central power in order to preserve traditional cultural or political ideas, the status quo, that is, cultural norms and political norms, limits on opposition to the government or criticizing the government, limits on personal freedoms. Take that to an extreme and you get totalitarianism. That's government or political systems that try to exert full control over the people. It tries to control their thoughts, their thinking, daily activities, and such governments completely outlaw opposition parties or any criticism of the government, severely oppress personal freedoms, and oppress critics and opponents. So authoritarianism, we think of fascist governments, like Franco's Spain and such. Totalitarian governments, we think more like the Soviet Union, maybe Hitler's Germany. Another word that gets tossed around, often vaguely, in some of these political discussions is socialism. Now, socialism is a range of differing political and social philosophies. And this word gets really misused a lot sometimes, or used really vaguely. It can refer to any kind of system that involves some kind of social ownership of either the means of wealth, of means of production, or the fruits of production, profits, the means of wealth, either wealth that people have or the wealth that people make from their businesses. And this really gets applied sloppily to a lot of things that are very different. You can talk about democratic socialism or free market socialism or European socialism, like in European countries, which are essentially capitalistic, but have a number of socialistic elements, welfare state, a lot of government benefits to help those who don't benefit from the capitalist economy. And there's a strong emphasis still on personal freedoms. That's kind of your European socialism, which is really a mixed free market, mixed market kind of economy and political system. On the other hand, the word often gets applied to what is really communism, like in the old Soviet Union, which is really more authoritarian or totalitarian. You could call it state capitalism because it's not really the people that own the means of production or the wealth, it's the government, an elite few in the government that owns and controls the economy. And it is run for the benefit of the elite in power. So it's sort of a state capitalism. And some people would say that's not real socialism. It's a perversion of socialism. Also, in these discussions, we'll hear the word cabal. It's like a secret, usually a small secret plot or conspiracy by high-level persons, like to take over something, to take over a country or some entity. And so some of the theories we'll talk about today are really kind of big to be called a cabal, but you hear that term used sometimes. Then we have the term New World Order. This is a term that's been used especially by politicians and government leaders simply to describe some new state of affairs, often in an optimistic manner, after some major historical event or change. So, for example, after the founding of the U.S., some American founding fathers used the expression New World Order to talk about the hope of like a new world of freedom and democracy. And that's actually in the Eye of Providence on our dollar bills. It says in Latin, Novus Ordo Seclorum, New World Order. And that eye, it's not an Illuminati symbol. People think it is. It's really just a traditional Eye of Providence, or sort of God, or some conception of God, whether in a Christian sense or in a more philosophical sense, of a God watching over the country, and the pyramid symbolizes the country, the new country. Similarly, people use this expression in a hopeful, optimistic way after the end of World War I, after the end of World War II, after the end of the Cold War, to talk about a new world with hopefully growing freedom and social and economic progress and democracy. But some on the extreme right were kind of suspicious of this, and they have used the term in a negative way and associated it with some kind of a global conspiracy to take over the world. So let's talk about some of these world domination conspiracies or global conspiracies. These theories often hypothesize one or more, usually some of these elements together. There's a secret power elite with a globalist agenda, that is to take over the world, to take over the globe. There's a secret cabal or group orchestrating all these activities, maybe the Illuminati or some other political group that came out of the Illuminati, or aliens, or something else. They often believe that there's some kind of secretly emerging totalitarian world government, or that this conspiracy is attempting to bring about a world government, a totalitarian world government, and they call it a communist or socialist totalitarian world government. And there's, of course, no evidence for this, as we'll see, but that's the central claim to these theories, that things are moving toward some kind of totalitarian world government, and the world is governments are moving secretly, quietly toward some kind of totalitarian world government. And so the goal is some kind of socialist, communist, one world government, limited freedoms for us, and that these power elites who are involved in this conspiracy are elite members of government, politics, business, journalism, academic, scientific communities, entertainment, Hollywood stars, etc. And oftentimes they believe that there are front organizations that are kind of the more public organizations that are working towards these secret goals on behalf of the Illuminati or something. Could be the United Nations, government agencies, particular governments, or people within governments that are trying to carry out these agendas. Or, as we see sometimes, other non-governmental organizations. These ideas, these conspiracy theories, mainly arose in the U.S. from extreme right-wing groups and extreme Christian fundamentalist groups, and they have grown over the decades and have started to become mainstream, as we have seen in recent years in my country, and they've spread over the internet and social media. So some common types of global conspiracy theories. The alleged conspiracies usually involve one of the following groups: Jewish bankers, Freemasons, Catholic Church, Illuminati, certain think tanks, aliens, or maybe other groups. So let's go through these. Jewish banking conspiracies. These are some of the early ones. These arise from extreme right-wing anti-Semitic sentiments. They look at Jewish business people and bankers around the world who are very successful and say, hey, that's suspicious. They must be involved in some kind of a conspiracy to take over the world. While true, disproportionate number of Jewish people have been successful in banking and business and also education and other fields. There's a good historical reason for that. In medieval Europe, Jewish people in Europe faced a lot of discrimination from Christians, the Christian church, whether Protestant or Catholic. And often they were restricted in their career opportunities because of this discrimination. So they could go into certain careers that sometimes Christians thought were kind of not so clean, like business, making, especially big business, banking, or maybe even education as well, because their opportunities were limited and their culture valued education. So it's not surprising that they succeeded in finance, banking, business, education, but then they get kind of unfairly blamed and stereotyped for that, and it turns into a conspiracy by people who are anti-Semitic. So it's a racist or maybe an extreme religious motivation here. Freemasons are a group that originated from stonemason guilds in England a long time ago. So a guild was like a group of professional workers in like in this case stonemasons, that is people who worked with stones in building and construction. So it was sort of like a union, but they also trained and certified, or made sure that their members were trained and properly certified stonemasons. And these guilds grew into more of a fraternal organization that is kind of an organization where men from different occupations and careers, middle and upper class men, could meet, network, and socialize. It was sort of a secret society, but not so secret. I mean, it had in some ways it pretended to be, a secret society, but really their practices, their rituals, their beliefs, their symbols were kind of in the open. They were openly published, and it wasn't that secret. But because of some of the religious orientations, the church didn't like them. They promoted general religious and moral ideas, so you had to, it varies from group to group, different Freemason groups, but you kind of had to believe in a god, but didn't have to be the Christian God. And sometimes people got exposed to versions of Christianity or Judaism that were outside the mainstream of, traditional Christianity or traditional Judaism. And so the Christian church didn't like that. They thought, those are some strange religious ideas that they're talking about. That's not right, because they deviated sometimes a lot from church teaching. And so traditional church groups really didn't like the Freemasons. And so the Freemasons get accused for various reasons of also being because they had some elements or appearance of a secret society. They then get kind of grouped with the Illuminati or other secret societies as something kind of evil. The Catholic Church, so more fundamentalist Protestants who reacted against Catholicism, especially more very, very fundamentalist Protestants, tend to think that the Catholic Church is evil and is part of a global evil conspiracy. The Illuminati is another group. This was once a real group. It was started in 1776 in Bavaria, a German province. And this is a group that consists of rationalists, people who believed in reason, secularists who believed in a secular government without control or influence by the church, and sometimes atheists or agnostics. Their goal was to oppose what they saw as inappropriate religious influences or control over the government and public life and politics, because back then the church and the state were closely kind of connected. And also they worked against abuses of state power. Because their views were kind of secular or anti-religious or atheist, they had to work in secret because such views were very unpopular at the time. They were discovered and then later forced to disband or break up in the later 1700s. And there's no evidence that they continue to exist or operate as a secret society after that. However, claims have been constantly made that they continue to exist. There isn't any evidence for this. And claims are made that they continue to work and take over governments, various governments and other sectors of society in different countries without any evidence. Now, a belief that grows out of this and is kind of similar are beliefs of the John Birch Society. So in the 1950s, again, the U.S. is experiencing this Red Scare, fear of communism. There was an extreme right-wing political organization that started around this time called the John Birch Society. Now, they held a very similar view of, so very similar to the Illuminati conspiracy theories, except they kind of updated it and applied it to modern-day American politics. So according to the John Birch Society, top leaders of governments, especially the U.S. government, political leaders, government officials, big business leaders, journalists, and intellectuals around the world, especially in the U.S., were involved in a secret conspiracy to take over the world and usher in a one-world totalitarian or communist or socialist government. The groups that they implicated in this conspiracy were actually think tanks. So a think tank is a group of people that get together to work on political and government problems. They're often maybe privately funded groups, and they might be kind of liberal or conservative leaning, and their job is to do research and propose solutions and try to influence those who are leaders in government and industry. And some think tanks are also sort of social networking groups that aren't so left or right leaning. And these are the groups that the John Birch Society accused of being secret societies for promoting a conspiracy. The Trilateral Commission, which is a think tank, and especially the Council on Foreign Relations. Now, the CFR has among its members many politicians from both major political parties in the U.S. and from other countries, and people from business and journalism, intellectuals, academic people, researchers. And it's a place for people from differing political viewpoints to share ideas and to do research and share research on ideas for solving major problems in the country and in the world. You get a diversity of liberal and conservative opinions, at least older, more mainstream conservative and liberal and moderate and such opinions. It's not so much for promoting any specific political agenda, but it's more like for sharing ideas and research on solving political and economic problems. Groups like the John Birch Society and others have had a bit of an influence, for example, in the Republican Party and the extreme right elements of the Republican Party, especially lately. And that has given birth to other movements like the QAnon movement, which you've probably heard of. QAnon is a more recent one. It's a new one, and it's about 10 or 20 years old, and it claims that there's a secret cabal of leading politicians, government officials, entertainers who are engaged in Satanism, worshiping the devil, working for the devil, and child sexual abuse. And there is, of course, no evidence for this, but people in the QAnon movement have also subscribed to other conspiracy theories. They often connect this with the Illuminati theories and the big steal election theories about the 2020 election. So some of the people involved in the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol were QAnon people. A lot of them were. So some of these people have engaged in violent acts to protest and really believe in a lot of weird things. Finally, there are alien conspiracy theories, where there are older UFO conspiracy theories like what you see in the X-Files TV show, or the newer reptilian theory that and it's kind of like the Illuminati theory, except major government leaders around the world are reptilian or reptile-like aliens, and they can change their appearance. They can do shape-shifting, that is, change their appearance, or maybe wear a disguise. So supposedly Obama, Biden, Putin are actually reptilian aliens, and it's part of a secret conspiracy to take over the world, kind of similar to Illuminati theories. All of these are all kind of similar to Illuminati theories, or offshoots of Illuminati theories, or involve the Illuminati in some way. That's kind of like the blueprint for your standard global conspiracy theory. Although the Illuminati theory was probably inspired a lot by the anti-Semitic conspiracy theories of earlier. So some of the influences or origins behind these ideas. Extreme political and religious views are a factor in why people make these theories or fall for these theories or embellish them and promote them. nationalism and racism, of course, anti-Semitism, anti-Catholicism, extreme religious and political views, especially among more extreme Christian fundamentalists, are these end-time scenarios where they believe that the world is going to come under the control of an antichrist who is a being that will be connected with the devil and work for the devil before Judgment Day. These kinds of ideas are not traditional Christian ideas. They did not exist within Christianity before 1830. They developed in the U.S. in the 1830s among certain fundamentalist groups, and have become kind of more popular throughout more conservative forms of Christianity in the U.S. and in the world, more so fundamentalists. But it's not a traditional view of Christians, and most Christians, Protestant or Catholic, would not accept these particular views. These are kind of more extreme views. So because of this, because of these end-time views, people are expecting some evil power to take control of the earth, and that plays in with these conspiracies. That goes right along with these conspiracy theories. And thus people are likely to believe in the prevalence of evil people or evil forces working right now in the world. Evil people in government, evil forces, demonic forces in the world that are bringing about all of these changes that we're seeing in our society. And a tendency to ascribe evil intentions to people. He's promoting those policies because he's evil. He's part of the Illuminati. He's serving the Antichrist, or he's influenced by the devil. That leads to political and religious backlash against various ideas and movements that more extreme people don't understand. Now, this could be people on the extreme left or people on the extreme right. They can fall into this kind of thinking. In recent years, the problems have been on the extreme right. Due to extreme political or religious views, people also fall for conspiracy theories due to backlash or a strong reaction against various ideas that they don't understand. Rationalism. People who are rationalists accept reason as a final authority for decision-making or for scientific discovery, for belief and inquiry in different fields. Secularism, the belief that politics and government and education should not be influenced inappropriately by religious ideas or a church or a church group, should be based on non-religious ideas. And even trying to exclude religious influences and forces from government and policy decisions or education, that is, making decisions about how we should educate our kids. Religious and political backlash against atheism and agnosticism, which have become more prevalent in modern times. Again, backlash against non-traditional religious beliefs and religious movements, especially certain religious beliefs that may claim to be Christian or Jewish, but really fall outside of the traditional church teachings or traditional Christian or traditional Jewish teachings, kind of more novel ideas and practices, especially where they claim to have special knowledge, or even like other religions that are kind of offshoots of those religions or related to those religions, that have non-traditional beliefs or practices, as well as alternative religious movements and alternative spirituality, forms of spirituality that are more popular today. Sometimes religious reaction against the occult, that is, people who are into supernatural practices, psychics, witchcraft, black magic, and such, or even just, astrology. The New Age movement, which is sort of a spirituality movement in the U.S. or in the Western world, that's kind of based on some Eastern religious ideas, but very Westernized. People who believe in like magic crystals or certain kinds of alternative medicine. And there's also religious and political backlashes against scientific discoveries that threaten maybe their extreme beliefs. This could be racist beliefs, or it could be very conservative or minor religious beliefs, like the world is 6,000 years old. It was created in 6 days, literally. I mean, most Christians, Protestant or Catholic, have no problem with believing in an old earth and in evolution. This is a minority of religious people who feel threatened by scientific discoveries, and more recently discoveries in psychology or discoveries about sexual orientation and gender identity and things like that. reactions against social and political changes and progressive movements, and as a result, a tendency to kind of demonize other political or religious groups, other political beliefs or religious beliefs, especially as they become popular. So some reasons for the personal appeal of some of these conspiracy theories: again, poor understanding of science, political and social changes, and poor understanding of differing belief systems, poor understanding of international politics and economics and the complexities of how these things work, especially during times of political or social change or economic problems or instability. And of course, there are cognitive factors, like I talked about in my last video: poor critical thinking skills, relying on fallacies and biases, cognitive dissonance, a need to rationalize extreme beliefs. But another factor is disenfranchisement, and this is not an excuse, just an explanation. So some people feel disenfranchised. They feel like their voice doesn't matter. They feel like maybe their vote doesn't count so much. They feel like they don't have a sense of control anymore. Maybe they used to be in the white majority, maybe white male majority of a certain religion that was once the culturally dominant view in their country, and things have changed and that's no longer considered a dominant view. And so these people feel threatened, defensive, a loss of control maybe. They don't understand the changes in society and culture. Why is our country becoming more secular? Why is it becoming more liberal? Why are countries legalizing marijuana or legalizing gay marriage? Why are people not going to church like they should? These changes they don't understand. They don't understand political upheavals or major changes, bad economy, people losing jobs, major political events that they can't understand. How did 9/11 happen? How could JFK have been assassinated? How could the election have been won by that group of people? And so again, having this sort of sense of special knowledge, I understand it's a conspiracy. Other people don't believe me, but I understand it's a conspiracy. At least it makes them feel some sense of empowerment. I understand what's going on. Other people don't understand, but hey, I understand what's going on. You feel special. You feel like you understand what's wrong with the world when other people don't. When you think that the world is going down the toilet, you think, which is probably not a fair assessment, but you think it's going down the toilet and you understand why, or your group, your little community understands why. It makes you feel some sense of empowerment. I understand what's going on. It gives you some sense of a false sense of control over your life or understanding of things. Another reason is this: humans tend to see false patterns. Look at the clouds. What do you see? An elephant, a bunny, a dog. It's just clouds. It's just water vapor. But we see patterns that are not there. That's called pareidolia. You see patterns that are not really there in visual data or auditory data. You hear things that are not really there sometimes. False pattern recognition. And there are good reasons why humans might have benefited from this a long time ago, but in our modern complex world, it can cause us problems because we see things that are not there. And when we talk about data, the word for seeing false patterns in sets of data is apophenia. This is kind of similar to pareidolia. So you don't understand why your culture is changing, why the economy is bad, why maybe you've lost your job. Well, there's a lot of data to look at and see all kinds of false connections, false patterns that are not there, circumstantial evidence, false connections. Depending on what you look at, you can look at maybe 10 years of data, like elections and political changes in your country or in the world, or in the past 50 years, the past 100 years, or the past 200 years. You've got a huge data set. You can look at all kinds of economic patterns, economic up and downs, economic growth, recessions, depressions, wars, political changes in one country or throughout the world. There's a huge data set, and everything that any politician has said and done, anything that any government has said or done in the past 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 years, it's a huge data set. You can find any kind of pattern you want to find. And it's easy to find conspiracies that aren't really there. And then this gets made into a nice narrative. So there's the power of narrative. So narrative is like a story. So why are people not winning elections? Why are people losing jobs around me? Why is the economy not good? Why is the culture changing so much? Why this COVID outbreak and all these restrictions on us? Well, let me tell you a story. It all starts when somebody founded the Illuminati and so on. People who believe, and especially people who promote conspiracy theories, can tell a nice story. It's a wrong story. It's a fiction, but it's a nice sounding story. It explains so much. It can explain whatever you want it to explain. Why did the U.S. lose that war? It's the Illuminati. Okay, why did that war start? The Illuminati. Why the recent increase in violent crime in this country? It's the Illuminati. Okay, why are rock songs getting so weird? The Illuminati. Anything you want to explain, you can explain with a conspiracy theory. You can tell a nice story that will seemingly persuade other people because it can explain so many things: culture changes, social changes, politics, economics, even stuff around you. It's a very nice story. And you can go as far back as you want to, the last 10 years or the last 50 years or to 1776 or before that. It can make a nice story, and lots of conspiracy theory promoters have published entire books where they spin their own story, their own narrative about how this evil conspiracy started. I've read some of them when I was young. I know. It's a very appealing story. It helps to people who hear it. It makes sense to them. It's wrong, it's fictional, but it makes sense to them. And so people can fall for it, which is very unfortunate. So is this harmless entertainment? No. These ideas are pretty harmful for the following reasons. One, it stunts or makes people suspend their critical thinking skills. You suspend your critical thinking skills, or you don't learn critical thinking skills to begin with. And so people are vulnerable to other kinds of wrong beliefs, being scammed, or the newest version of QAnon, the newest QAnon promoter and his or her ideas about, okay, who are the devil worshippers in government now? It makes people cynical, that is, distrustful in an unhealthy way of political leaders, the political system. There's a certain skepticism that's healthy toward your government, towards politicians, especially politicians. But when it's a negative distrust, automatically, especially because their beliefs are different from yours, that's unhealthy. And especially when this gets magnified and it's extreme and it gets mainstream through social media. This breeds resentment against others, resentment and hatred towards people who believe differently, people who are of different races or sexualities, people of different countries, people of different backgrounds. It breeds unhealthy resentment and distrust and hatred of others. Easily leads to racism, sexism, homophobia. It makes people vulnerable, in extreme cases, to terrorism or violent acts. Some believers in QAnon have been involved in violent activities, especially right-wing incidents in the US and Germany and other countries. QAnon believers and other believers of conspiracy theories have done such, and especially the January 6th attack on the US Capitol. QAnon and other extreme right-wing groups and believers in racist and other conspiracy theories were involved in that attack. Aside from terrorism, the more extreme fruit, people who believe in conspiracy theories are just vulnerable to political manipulation. Think of Trump. Trump really appealed to people who believed in conspiracy theories. So the words he used were specifically aimed at people who felt disenfranchised or people who believed in conspiracies of different kinds. And some of his words were tailored to racists and bigots and anti-feminist, sexist people. The best example is Hitler. In a time of political instability in Germany, Hitler really used his message. He used conspiracy theories. He appealed to people based on conspiracy theories. Of course, Hitler was very anti-Semitic. I think you know that. And he believed in conspiracy theories about the Jews, the Jewish banking conspiracy theories and such. And in his mind, he connected this also with communism, and he kind of connected communism and socialism together. To him, Marxism, communism, to him, were connected with Judaism, with Jewish influences. To him, it was all part of a conspiracy. I don't know if he believed in the Illuminati, but in his speeches, he connected communism, Marxism, and Jews. It was to him all one big conspiracy. Marxism was a Jewish plot to him. And he used this to appeal to people, to feed them false information, to appeal to their sentiments, their anti-Semitism, and their disenfranchisement, especially with a really bad economy, unemployment. This is dangerous. And so aside from that extreme case, think about today in the U.S. A person feels disenfranchised. Maybe a person had a nice factory job and the factory shut down and the company moved the jobs to Mexico. Or they worked in the coal mines in Virginia and they had a good job as a coal miner. Their father had a good job as a coal miner. Their grandfather had a good job as a coal miner. Jobs are gone. They can easily fall victim to wrong narratives that persuade them to blame Mexicans or immigrants for taking the jobs. It was the company that moved the factory to Mexico. It's not the fault of immigrants or Mexicans. Or for losing their jobs, they can blame, minorities, immigrants. They can blame conspiracy. They can fall back into racist conspiracy theories or environmentalists. It's some evil conspiracy. The environmentalists and the Illuminati, the environmentalists hate us. I mean, they don't understand, well, coal mines are closing because people don't want coal. It's bad for the environment. Think, oh, those environmentalists, they hate common people like us. They hate America. And this is to promote socialism, government control, and to make us dependent on the government. We have to get help from the government. It's communism. So sadly, people are easy victims for conspiracy theories. People who are less educated, people who come from a background of more extreme or very conservative political or religious beliefs. It could be extreme left-wing beliefs too. People in poverty, people in unemployment, minorities in San Francisco. Some of them really believe that AIDS was created by the CIA to kill them. That's more of an extreme left-wing conspiracy theory, but people in different groups are open to these kinds of deceptions. What can be done? I have no idea. I mean, generally, that's a complex topic, and I would have to do a lot of research. Generally, the idea is education. The public needs to be much better educated. Critical thinking skills, better public education in general, a better understanding of differing political beliefs and movements. Well, just a whole lot of stuff people need to be educated on. There are lots of good YouTube channels that debunk or expose different false beliefs and pseudoscience beliefs, conspiracy theories. There are lots of good YouTube channels that debunk and expose or at least talk about them. So at least educating ourselves about these kinds of misconceptions and false beliefs and unhealthy belief systems. If you are watching this video, then the change can start with you. The answer can start with those of us who are aware that there's a problem, and we can educate ourselves by reading about how these crazy ideas come about, what they are like, why people fall for them, and maybe starting from there, we can then hopefully begin to change society and educate society about these kinds of wrong ideas and why they are wrong, why they are harmful. The task ahead of us is a major one, and is something we need to do if we want to save our democracies and the social fabric and moral fabric of our countries and the progress of our countries and our civilization. On that cheerful note, I wish you luck. I wish the best for you, and goodbye.